This is the topic of today's conversation, maximizing the benefit and minimizing the harm of medical marijuana. And I'm going to start off with an introduction about myself. But before I do that, really I'd like this to be a conversation. I'm very interested in your questions and in your personal experiences and your stories. I think that we all have a lot to share with each other. And one of the real problems that we've had over several generations with marijuana being illegal is that the wisdom hasn't been shared and passed on from the generations. So let's start sharing, ask questions, let's make this a conversation as much as we can while we get through some of this interesting material. I've been interested in marijuana for a long time, but once I started to learn more about the medical aspects of it, I was struck by what a wide variety of conditions it could treat and how many different people it could help at so many different levels. And so I started exploring more about the physiology of marijuana and different ways of using it and how to make the most of it, and that's what I hope to bring to you today. My background, I have degrees in nutrition and biology from Indiana University. In between undergrad and med school, I became more interested in integrative medicine and alternative therapies, and I studied hypnotherapy, energy medicine, herbs, other complementary and alternative approaches to healing. And then I went to medical school to become an osteopath. I love osteopathy, which in its truest form is using the hands to treat the body, to promote physiology, to promote healing. And that's something that I continue to do in my practice today as I blend that with some of the other healing arts. And all of these complementary, integrative, alternative healing arts seem to go very well with marijuana, which has become a big part of my practice recently. I came to Maine from Arizona. That's where I went to medical school. I came here for residency. I did 1 year of a family medicine residency in Augusta at Maine General. And then I left the program. I'm a general practitioner now. But essentially, I have a specialty practice, which is doing integrative medicine. And we do a lot of medical marijuana in our practice, but that's not the entirety of it. So let's get started here. And does anyone have any questions about my background or qualifications? Okay. So today in the talk here, we'll discuss briefly some major points about the plant cannabis. We'll talk about health conditions that may respond to marijuana, the effects of marijuana on the body, the optimal dosage of marijuana, different delivery systems, the varieties of marijuana, set and setting, which can affect how marijuana plays out in our life, the experience of using marijuana, and the healing path of marijuana. So let's get started here. First of all, the plant. Marijuana is cannabis sativa. The part of the plant that the medicine comes from is the flower or the bud. It's a compound flower, many small flowers on one budding structure. This is a dioecious plant, which means it has male and female plants for the same species, and they're separate by plant, whereas a lot of plants will have male and female structures in the same plant. That can happen with marijuana, but it's generally separate. Sure. So a dioecious plant that becomes a hermaphrodite would have both genders on the same plant. That's right. Sinsemilla is a term that in Latin literally means without seeds. And it brings up an interesting point of why the marijuana without seeds is higher quality and more desirable for medicine. Basically, the medicinal compounds in marijuana are found in the oils of the plant. The plant uses them for defense against the environment, defense against free radical oxidation that can come from ultraviolet light from the sun and from invading organisms like bacteria or funguses or viruses. So they're healing compounds in the plant themselves found in the oils. Now when the female flowering structure hasn't been pollinated yet, it starts making more oils because it wants a piece of pollen floating through the air to stick to the plant and stick to the flower, get transmitted down into the ovary, fertilize, and create a seed. That's how this plant survives. So when it hasn't been exposed to any pollen, it makes more oil and more oil and more oil. It's literally a virgin female reproductive organ that's wanting to be fertilized. which has, I think, some good metaphors for the capacity of this plant. It's the virgin female. Hemp, on the other hand, is the same species, Cannabis sativa, pictured in the lower right. You can see it grows quite tall, and it doesn't have too much medicinal use that we're aware of at the moment. The fibers are incredible, though, for textiles, fiberboards, papers. We're not going to get into it, but this has been used for, since the 20s in Ford cars and so forth. Now houses are built out of it. Sure. There you go, Declaration. Or even I've heard the first version of the Constitution. Right. So this is what rope always used to be made out of, early papers. The seed, which you can find in either variety of cannabis, but is mass-produced in the hemp, that's a high-quality food product, actually. There's very few foods in the vegetable world that have a complete profile of essential amino acids. That means that in nature, there's some things that we need to get from our food that we can't produce ourselves. There's certain amino acids, certain fatty acids that we just can't make for ourselves. Hemp happens to have all of those, all the essential amino acids and all the essential fatty acids, all in one food product. That's also true of soy, but to a much lesser extent with the essential fatty acids. And I'm not aware of any other plant product that has that type of profile. The other thing is that when you look at the seed, it's almost completely protein and oil, which makes it very efficient as fuel for humans. And it's also very efficient for industrial production of oil. When you press the seeds, you get oil, and that oil is food quality, but it could also be used to make fuel, plastics, pretty much anything that we make from a hydrocarbon, anything that we make from crude oil that we drill out of the ground could be made from hemp oil, carbohydrate. All right, let's... So the difference is just it's like breeding dogs, same species. They could breed with each other, but when you separate the lineage for so long, they can start looking different, having different morphologies. So yeah, you could take pollen from this plant and put it on this plant and it would pollinate. And that's, from a biologist's perspective, the definition of being the same species. Could they have viable offspring? And so yeah, they can. They're just different strains or different varieties, you could call it. Sure, so that's the other thing. Most hemp has barely any THC in it, if any. And the other thing about hemp is that the cannabinoid profile varies quite a bit because it's been bred for length and seed production and fiber composition. It hasn't been bred for its medicinal qualities. So if you even went out to a hemp field and gathered these different plants, they would have quite a variety of cannabinoids in them, but not nearly as much as any medicinal plant. It's still interesting, though, to think about the cannabinoids in hemp. Any other questions about this brief botanical review? So here's a partial list of health conditions that marijuana can help. And I'm actually going to go through some of this. I know it's right out in front of you. Attention deficit disorder and hyperactivity disorder. ALS, which is Lou Gehrig's disease. It's a neurodegenerative disease. Alzheimer's, anorexia, anxiety, asthma, ataxia, which is a problem with movement and walking, bipolar disease, cachexia, which is wasting syndrome from not being able to eat or maintain nutritional status, cancer, chronic fatigue, chronic pain, cramps, whether they're abdominal or menstrual, Crohn's disease, diabetes, depression, epilepsy, fever, fibromyalgia, glaucoma, hepatitis, an infection of the liver, HIV and AIDS, incontinence, insomnia, migraine headache, MRSA, which is a methicillin-resistant Staph aureus. It's a bacteria that is resistant to some of our strongest antibiotics. Marijuana, or cannabinoids, the compounds found in marijuana can kill it. Multiple sclerosis, nausea, neuralgia, neuropathy, Parkinson's, PMS, post-traumatic stress disorder, rheumatoid arthritis, sickle cell anemia, spasms, spinal injury, stroke, Tourette's, vomiting. it's a huge list, and I'm sure this isn't the entire list. I just included conditions actually that there's at minimum a drop of research that documents it, whether it's a case report that's been published or an animal study or even an in vitro study. All of these conditions have some scientific documentation that marijuana could be helpful in it. When I see this on the slide, when I see it in my practice, when I think about it, I'm at first skeptical of anything, any single substance that could purport to treat or cure so many different conditions. And I think we've seen snake oil remedies and fads, come and go that don't have a lot of scientific evidence that say this will cure everything. I do believe in the power of placebo. I think that's great. Truly, our bodies have an internal pharmacy that could come up with a cure to any condition, and that's always documented. But still, I'm suspicious, can one plant or one substance really treat so many different things, and how is that possible?